In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But war is my profession. Unlike these naive Astartes, who view war as a challenge for honor and glory, I am different. Always looking for efficient solutions and conservation of health. Humanity may have numbers, but those numbers are horrifically mismanaged. Most of the times, the numbers work against the Imperium, which is so spread out over immense, mind-boggling distances that it cannot even protect its citizens. And so, I need to use Primarch Khan to protect humanity, while myself figure out a way to save it. Blank genes against the chaos. The genes of the Katakans spread as much as possible for physical endurance, then weapons, armor and strategy to convert this future strength into striking power. Primarch Khan now wears a Katakan-style flak suit, with black stone armor plates inserted to protect vital body parts. Also, a refractor field on his belt, and a Katakan-style adamantium knife at his hip. He did get to live among my troops for a time, and it shows. The white penitent's robe has been converted into a cape, with the cowl lowered right now. I open my palms, and a data slate filled with real and fake STC patterns appears in my right hand, and a null rod in the other. Wear this null pattern at all times, Astartes. Half of your brothers have already fallen to warp insinuations and lies. Don't make me have to find you again. The artifact has been sheathed in a centimeter of black stone as well, by my Lamenter Master of the Forge, giving it increased resistance against brute force. Primarch are very similar to Ogrins after all, prone to rip off doors or heads in fits of rage, or just by being careless. Plus he might need to smack some demon with it. Khan picks the rod with suspicion, as he knows it would restrict some of his psycho-based powers. I won't be able to fight or duel with this. The Primarch complains like a big child. Yes, but you do have your White Scar's sons to slice things up for you. Now go and talk with the crazy Inquisitor on the space fortress. And then, do what you can for the Imperium. Armed sentinels and missile boats I'd say, but then I don't have a say in the ruling of the Imperium. The High Lords might kill you anyway, for usurping their powers with your simple existence. I explain in a gentle voice, and deposit him right next to Captain Thrusius, of the Scythes of the Emperor Space Marine chapter. My Inquisitor raises an eyebrow at my unceremonious conduct. You would actually punch Sanguinius, like you said. Nothing seems to scare you, not even a Primarch. I actually would, but not in public. Right, Canis? You hamstring the vainglorious father, while I punch his teeth out. With my left hand of course. I mutter in a cheerful tone, and scratch my wolf on his smart head. Woof? The wolf wanders and shows his deadly teeth, somehow doubting he could bite anyone without grievous damage. Nah, not for real, clever wolf. I just don't enjoy the burden he left on my shoulders. Sanguinius should have sent the invincible Swordmaster to fight, or even better, teleported a Nova Shell inside that traitor's battleship and stopped the whole tragedy in a single blow. But no, why not die in a pointless duel? I commented in a disgusted voice. Rose sighs and waves Ludvius outside, before his blood tears flood the room and make a mess on the carpet. The Astartes stomps loudly as he leaves, and crashes the armor door with an angry and violent gesture. Maybe I was too open and honest, for this universe. Perhaps it is better if you do not return to the Imperium, at all. Your own bodyguard was ready to bite your head off. My girlfriend demands in a cold voice. Exactly my thought, dear Rose. Except for small incursions that would save trillions of lives. Maybe. I still need to visit Sutha, once in a while. There are like 900 trillions of Tyranids heading this way and hoping to eat everyone. I grumble in a meeker voice. Also, that fact is very true, and kinda worrying, if not that urgent, not yet. Plus that world engine of the Necrons, when it did come out, I'll really have to come back to Sutha and mess it up. Not for a decade you will not, Pef Lancefire. You're on thin ice, and these exploits do not expunge your unruly conduct, only forgive it, due to extenuating circumstances. The Inquisitor proclaims with an accusing voice. I shrug and hold a finger up. Right. Do order these scythes to seal up and tow that Tau battleship they have miraculously captured, to forge Metallica. And then, start preparing a large infiltration force of fake defectors from your stormtrooper regiment. We'll need as many humans inserted into the Tau ranks and pinpoint valuable technology to steal. All of these infiltrators should receive the strongest mental hardening procedure that your Inquisition has. Those ethereals use a type of mind control similar to the enslavers, but I do have a potential material for a mental shield. With those words, I produce a couple enslaver bones and leave them floating in midair. Is this a mineral? No, it's organic but somehow resisting my soul readings. A type of Eldar Wraith bone? Rose wonders as she attempts to scan the floating bones and her psychoprobing fails. Thus, I take out my bone staff and leave it floating as well. I believe is indeed a type of rare creature's bone. I had my own staff made by a powerful artificier, but those services are paid in precious commodities like greater demons or Eldar avatars. Maybe a Catan shard, if you're willing to sell the one in the Pharos. I ask in a teasing voice. She scowls at my words, and shakes her head. Again with that kind of outrageous trades. Also, did you have anything to do with those out-of-time Astartes showing up on some forged worlds, millennia after they were thought dead or lost in the warp? I nod slowly. Just like your Inquisitor buddy on the Aegida fortress, the ungrateful bastard. I traded some captured Eldar and their artifacts, and this person happened to have a collection of Astartes. I also saw an Adeptus Custodes among the shelves, but didn't have anything of equal value to trade. But, that was then. I do have some Dark Eldar now, all their Archons in fact, so I might get a new deal. Her Ordosino's teachings come forward abruptly, as she grabs my chin. What else did you steal from Camorra? I sob in rogue trader pain, and start disclosing some of it. Okay, most of it. I'm just too weak in the hands of an Inquisitor, I'm sure everyone can understand that. Much later, she rests on my chest, all her energy spent in deep but vigorous interrogation. Damn lucky, rogue trader. Too bad most of your collection cannot be put to use. You'd burn on the first pyre the Imperium could throw. And we're very good at setting up pyres. Rose complains as her hand measures my increased musculature. Not yet at Astartes level, but getting there. Maybe a decade or 5. Mind shields, Tau enslavers, and null rods. I don't even have access to such a rare relic. My beloved murmurs in a completely fake pity. She just wants one too. I shall trade for this guy's best work then. A staff that's both a mind shield and a warp shield, and can also fly or crush tanks with one blow. Maybe a mind shielding Rosarius too. And the same for Janice and Victor. Who knew that having a big family will be so expensive? I complain in fake pity as well. Just at that second, the other Inquisitor encounters the lost Primarch and tries to have him arrested. Damn cretin. He vanishes in my labyrinth, as a sign of Emperor's displeasure. What? Don't believe me? It says right here on my warrant. My words are the Emperor's words and I speak with his voice. Come my dear. You return to Aegida and support the Primarch, while I try to close the Hadex anomaly with my trader skills. And they say rogue traders are good for nothing. I mutter in fake annoyance as I open the door to call Ludvius back. Dressing in Astartes power armor isn't that easy. Might need to have the tech priests design some kind of automated dressing room. And then use 1,000 convicts to test the kinks out. Maiming and mutilations from faulty wiring is not a pleasant prospect. Especially not for my own limbs, so make that 2,000 convicts. Much safer that way. Rose dresses by herself, because leather isn't that hard to dress into. Not all that protective either, so I should consider giving her the Silent Sisters kind of armor, just painted in gold and black. You were working hard, I see. New baby on the way? My brother asks in a curious voice. I just smile sheepishly and give him a thumb up. Very likely, considering how much gene seed I spent today. Send me to my room, Deg 11. Just next to Janice. Rose commands in a stern voice once she is ready. I obey, and she vanishes from my blackstone vault of a room, without the familiar purple flash of a teleporter. My tesseract is quite the cheat, I know. Sadly, I have to walk towards the teleportarium, escorted by my blood angels and silent companions. Well, they have seen the Pharos anyway, during the expedition for Chronoblades. We will need to repeat that exploit, and try to find more life-draining blades or hexagrammic necklaces that can block out warp intrusions. In near company strength, they depart to the desert artifact world on another looting expedition, after I scan the orbit for more Tau vessels. This time, there is only the Scythe strike cruiser and their captured prize, getting patched up for warp towing. Mighty Zorhulash, someone has been cruel to you. I observe as the Catan is 3 times more dissected now than before. The young Inquisitor tries his best, and I can fake pain and screaming very well. Doesn't really bother me, as you can imagine, Pef Lancefire. The Catan replies in a proud voice. I nod absently, as I doubt even an exterminatus would bother him. In the other timeline, they did blow up the planet with a cyclonic torpedo, and that only released the Catan from his shackles. Maybe a vortex warhead would work. Multidimensional weapons did tend to ignore any type of defense or durability, just like that soul spear I sold to Trazyn. And speaking of the devil, Necron Lord, you have been really busy. I comment while scanning his new collection. More army regiments, some navy ships, even a few titans and an ordinatus underscore you later on huge tracks. Ah, my favorite stranger. Yes, some scoundrels tried to attack Solemnis. Friends of yours perhaps? Trazyn the Infinite asks in a suspicious voice. I snort in amusement. I take it you peeked into Forge Venatoria and stole something of value. And perhaps also blasted Hellforged Unna into small bits of screaming rocks and burning souls. This better be worth it, puppy stranger. I lost 3 subordinates on this quest, all valiantly fighting to the last scrap of necrodermis while posing as myself. The Necron mutters in a proud voice. I sigh and push a Drukhari Archon, without weapons or armor which all sold separately, right into his robotic hands. I coughed the thief who tried to steal your Nightbringer. Now that Kimura is gone, Dark Eldar items will become a rarity, as with all extinct species. Really? Well, it is easy to check. Oh. Someone burned it all to the ground. And there's Tyranids feasting on dead corpses everywhere. Such a mess. Trazyn replies after a minute. The Necron probably has a save point there, after I sold him that expensive ticket to my first attempt. I do have a picked video of an Eldar avatar and a Keeper of Secrets dueling in the middle of High Kimura, right as an Astartes battle barge detonates an Exterminatus torpedo on top of them both. After some 30 seconds of the last time stamp, the area will be clear of witnesses, except those 2 protagonists which just wouldn't die. If only someone had the skill and patience to send an observer, and collect those engines of destruction for a complete set. What use is a craftword council, without an avatar, right? I whisper in his mind, while Trazyn plays dress-up doll with the insane Dark Eldar Archon I have just gifted him. I see, you have been there already, collecting all the Archons and who knows how many relics and rare people. Now the timeline is looped by your Tesseract and I can only arrive later. Trazyn complains in a Time Doctor manner. It wasn't my intention to protect the timeline, but it does work out perfectly. So, the reality cage and the reality bombs? I demand in a wry voice. You will need 10 battleship strength reactors to power up a planetary-size reality cage, even after I repaired 1,000 flaws in this device and made it 1,000 times simpler to construct, just like that warpless drive. Or, you can bury the device deep under the planetary crust, and use a single reactor for magnetic conversion. This deep core cage is a distinct invention of my own creation, and is sold separately. The Genius Necron offers as a starting point, and holds the data slate with my device. Reality cage, and a working one. I was pretty sure he also copied the magnetic power mechanism from a forged world, maybe even Venatoria, but whatever. It would actually make the STC template more believable, and reduce the risk of sabotage too. It would be more difficult to infiltrate a saboteur under 100 km of boiling magma. With another flick of the Pharos, I handed him a Drukhari Void Mine and an Eldar Pulse underscore laser. Both weapons would make amazing weapons for humanity, if only we had the science to build them. We don't, but a certain Necron surely does. I'm quite certain even a Necron overlord would be annihilated inside the barrier, once that fragment of dark light detonates. You may use it on a hated enemy, once I get a simplified STC schematic. The pulse laser is actually too advanced for my friends, and it needs to be dumbed down, such that even a human can use it, or a tech priest repair it from an STC pattern. I explain in a cheerful voice. An enemy of mine. Killed by a Dark Eldar weapon. Now this would be a master stroke. He ponders for a long time. Already figuring out how the void mine works. That's great for him, but Trizin might have too many enemies, and not all domestic. I just wait, as my people exploring the desert world for more artifacts will take time. Not attacking human, Eldar or Tau targets. I kinda need them for my plans, just like I do for your own dynasty. As for payment, I will offer a null rod. Everyone should have one of these, with the galaxy infested by psychers and warp entities. I demand as he begins writing on a STC dataslate. And thus, I get the geomagnetic reactor as well. One worry will soon be reduced, with planet-sized Geller fields enforcing reality and preventing warp incursions. Oh, that would be a decent trade. However, I reserve the right to defend my world even from those three races. Perhaps without lethal force, if I am in a good mood. The Overlord allows in a perky voice. Well, null rods are very rare indeed. I only have 4 of them, and already 2 are given away, to Khan and Trizin. I accept your claim, Lord Trizin. But, I need an STC template for a simpler to build null rod. And then, a few quality items for some special people. A couple of enslaver bone staffs, and a dual-use null and bone staff, that will still allow minimal psycho powers for the user. From beta level to delta. I ask as my trading goods appear in his room. He stops to consider my words, and fails at first. Blocking everything is doable, with some effort. But blocking the warp and still attacking with it, even at lower strength? Is that even possible? Trizin mutters in real confusion. Generally no, these qualities are antithetical. Unless, there's a bloodline flaw to exploit. I will provide gene samples for the user, because the staff needs to be gene-coded, and from a relative of hers, with both the pariah gene and the psycho gene. Also, that null staff should have inquisitorial decorations. I'm sure you know perfectly well how inquisitors like to present themselves. I explain in a patient voice. I send a few locks of hair, from Rose and Janice, and hope for the best. With a gene-coded staff, Trizin would be capable of tracing my Rose anywhere in the galaxy. Oh well. I was probably too paranoid. Under Rose's commands, the Echidna becomes all of a sudden friendly and welcoming, and thus I fill their prison dungeon with those 300 Mantis warriors I have rescued from the siege at Forge Angstrom. Their own Primarch is here to chastise them after all, since the Mantis were a successor chapter of the White Scars. The crew of a Mantis cruiser also appears in the adjacent cells, while their Mantis strike cruiser simply appears on a tangent course with the Inquisitorial Fortress, with a single tech priest on the bridge. Should be enough to allow an honor guard and an independent vessel for the Primarch, at least till Ultramar. When you reach the Segmentum Solar, do investigate Hive World Necromunda and that rich house with an STC in their basement. That should buy you some standing with the cult Mechonicus on Mars. You also have a gift in the Echidna's dungeon. I mentally tell Primarch Khan, while I observe the local Death Watch Astartes move around him, with proud but wary faces. Primarchs were all considered lost, but here he was, walking among them, looking rather beat up and sad. Is that you, Pef Lancefire? I thought this null rod stops all psycho powers. The giant replies in my mind, seeming surprised. I'm a blank, Astartes. So obviously, I'm not transmitting via a psycho method. Something to study in the future, no doubt. Military orders sent mind to mind, without chance of interference or distortion by the warp, might prove valuable for humanity. Then again, what do I know? I answer in a self-deprecating tone. Khan doesn't quite believe my meek demeanor anymore, although I wonder why. I was kinda harsh with him, at first, I admit. But he was also unruly and not in control of himself. What house, on that Hive world? The Primarch asks in an annoyed voice. Someone very rich with advanced weapons they make themselves. Nothing like a poor rogue trader like myself can even approach. And look, there's even a cruiser heading your way. Almost like someone wants to leave at great speed, before this system is attacked again. I explain in a cheerful voice and turn off the connection. Then I resume my family overwatch, directing my fleet of missile destroyers and frigates to rescue that forge in the siege _of Hypnet, and try to obtain an STC pattern for the advanced augury scanner called the _of Hypnet. With 25 escorts and 2 Nova Cannon cruisers we should provide sufficient surprise to gain a major favor from that forge world, plus another for the STC dataslate carried by Wenchen. Meanwhile, My bodyguard company and the Silent Sisters keep exploring the artifact planet, and close a couple more demon portals, for a single hexagrammic necklace and 2 more chronoblades. Oh well, perhaps this was it. They keep searching though, while I pinpoint the rest of the planets around Elivar for the next expansion phase, noting down 1,000 star systems possibly rich in minerals and 100 habitable planets. The Vitrix's captain, my dear daughter Teresa, receives those mental imprints with rough astronomic distances for each trip, so she can already plan the route and create a circle of outposts and small mining sites, depositing tech priests and servitors at each stop. Of course, only a blank captain gets a battleship, and even most of her bridge crew are blanks from my officer academy, plus thousands of retribution tech priests and 100,000 servitors with piratical origins. Victor receives his inheritance, the 4th Tesseract with 100 ships inside, including the other Overlord-class battlecruiser I captured at Badab. Plus a chronoblade and my old power armor. He was already ruling the Hive world, but now he would have the means to rule it absolutely. Dad, it is really okay to give me all this power? I can see everything on the planet, and everything in the system, till the most distant comets. Don't you need it? Victor asks after downloading the manual on with his savant implant. Bring comets and asteroids closer in a high orbit, and begin building more forts and corvette shipyards, plus a repair dock for those destroyers. There are a trillions Tyranids heading your way. I answer in a softer voice. Oh. I better get started then. And I think you have another labyrinth like this, right? My son wonders after powering up the savant functions. Smart boy. Anyway, teleporting a tesseract filled with goodies from Sutut to Elivar is a great way to transport an entire fleet from one end to the other of an entire segmentum. I can't send a fleet to Bale and help my sons that way, but I can gift them Terminator pattern Astartes armors covered in blackstone plates and personal force fields and archaeotech weapons like melee power weapons and grav guns or conversion beamers. And I do. They may all be blank and immune to warp, but they are flesh and bones. And knowing what Blood Angels get into all the time, I want my sons to emerge victorious and alive, all 200 of them. Am I cheating? Sure I am. But the galaxy is merciless, and those detractors to the blank program, even among the Blood Angels, will have to swallow their words. They shall be my finest warriors, in great armor shall I clad them, and with the mightiest guns they shall be armed, such that no foes can best them in battle. The Emperor said about his Astartes. The Emperor had the right idea, just didn't see it through. You said no foes, dear Adam, but what about chaos and the warp? Did you make them blank, or at least give them null rods? What about Silent Sisters as escorts and informants for the Primarchs? No, you did not, and thus half of them fell or rebelled and nailed you to your throne. Not to mention tactics and strategies. Sure, Big E possibly envisioned a billion of Astartes, cleansing the galaxy of Xenos or Oxykers, while erasing all religions they found. Didn't work quite like that. Even himself went to duel his wayward son in a sword fight, instead of telefragging that Horus moron with a plasma warhead. I turned back to searching the Ultima Segmentum for targets of opportunity, just as rose beams inside the Pharos. Inquisitor Barzano better appear again, perhaps after the Primarch leaves. And what's with those prisoners in my dungeons? My Rose asks while eyeing the crucified Catan on the cave's wall with distrust. The Mantis guys? Well, they're Khan's sons, aren't they? I hear the High Lords imposed a penance of their chapter, for being fooled into that rebellion. The Primarch is on penance too, so they fit rather well, right? I ask in a careless voice. So you're imposing penance even on Primarchs now? The Inquisitor growls in a colder voice. Those guilty of dereliction of duty, sure. Vulcan, Russ and Dawn among them. Lion and Robute lie wounded and in stasis, so I reserve judgment for now. As for my own Primarch, dear Sanguinius does as much as he can from beyond the grave. I might need a god of the dead to bring him back, and for that I have worked hard. I explain as an atmospheric incendiary appears beside me. Killing people, to revive an Eldar god? The Ordo Xenos asks in a deathly voice. No sacrifice is too great. No treachery too small. I quote while I begin priming the Exterminatus torpedo. Where is this munition going? My Rose asks curious. Had X anomaly, again. There's a Chaos Fleet gathering in the Blood_Trinity, more specifically at Mataros 3. They are also conscripting 1 billion of the local cultists, so I shall consign their souls to. I mutter as the weapon vanishes from the Pharos and detonates right under the infamous Carnage-class cruiser Black Grail and its attendant fleet. In a minute, the planet burns and none of the traitors escape the flames, incinerated along with all the weapon factories and demon engines they were preparing. 2 more torpedoes appear beside me, but I'm no hurry to exhaust myself. The other 2 planets in the Mataros system don't have fleets, and their heretical inhabitants can only wail in despair, knowing what fiery inferno awaits. Oblivion. You would make a great inquisitor, my dear Peth. Rose whispers while her tarot cards spin in the air, and yet refuse to fall. I think I have sufficient power for now. So, you heard of Inquisitor Cryptman's plan to burn all the worlds in the path of the Tyranids? Without evacuation, of course. I mused to myself, while keeping watch for my Astartes battling another demon incursion. That's, how many worlds are we talking about? The Inquisitor asks in a calculating voice. Well, burning worlds is a sad but realistic choice in this grim future. But sometimes common sense should prevail. At least burn them after the Tyranids land. Thousands of human planets at least, probably 10 times as many, if nobody reports him, and nobody will dare, because the Inquisition acts with godly impunity. And I'm not talking of our suitor solution, burning the Hive fleet in orbit. No, that would require he exposes himself to danger, instead of killing trillions of people preemptively. Plus all the valuable industry or 1 million guard regiments getting sacrificed. So what do you think I should do, dear Inquisitor? Slap his hand or pat his back? I asked rhetorically. My Rose frowns in deep thought. He will be excommunicated once those actions become public. And he has to know this. Keep burning those cultist worlds, while I make a call back to Terra. I nod and deposit my Rose in the Aegida teleportarium, while a thin chronoblade appears on Janice's desk, now decorated with 12 golden aquilars on the hilt, and a sheath of blackstone with a simple logo painted on it, Avdeos Imperator. Take care of this weapon, and don't cut yourself. It was made to kill great demons, sweetie. I whisper to my daughter. Thanks, Dad. It feels old and powerful and kinda scary. It has seen so much death. My daughter murmurs in my mind. I know it did. I have killed 100 orcs with it myself. I should arm my bodyguards with these weapons, as they can slice any material without effort. The hexagrammic pendant in my hand, once again covered with a brass cover painted with golden aquilars, I teleported on Robute Gulaman's chest, ignoring the stasis field he has kept inside on Mookridge. The Pharos is much too advanced for a mere stasis field to hold, just like I found out with the sounding board. As expected, the war poison inside his veins doesn't like it and draws away, slowly pouring out of his wound, almost like it tries to run. I wonder if this would also work on the Emperor. An STC data slate falls from nowhere right on the stasis console, and interrupts the field while alarms start blaring inside the Ultramarines Fortress Monastery. It does even contain the Warplus Drive STC and many of my inventions, including more effective ships, fighters and vehicles. In a minute after the stasis field vanished, the poisoned neck wound heals and the Primarch opens his eyes in confusion. Damn bullshit regeneration, but then I have seen Khan heal from many wounds worse than that. Just without the war poison. Why am I still alive? He murmurs to himself. Your duty has not ended, Astartes. You have rested enough. I comment in a wry voice, straight in his mind. Father? He asks in suspicion and worry. Ha! I'm not as old your father. Wait, I had something else. I says cheerfully and drop another null rod in his lap. I mean really, the Empress says no foes can best you, and then doesn't even give you a null rod? Pretty sure the warp was among those foes. I explain and then shut off the connection. This guy is smart enough, and might even remember about the Pharos soon enough. Time to finish my business here and get going. Because I have to leave Suto with some haste, I decide the Kroot and the Nikazar homeworlds need to go. One is home to a species of ever-evolving cannibals, eating their victims to absorb their traits, much like the Tyranids. Not a danger yet, due to being rather savage, but that could change rapidly once they eat an Eldar Exodite world, for example. The Nikasar are a species of psychers, which will not end well for them. Either producing another warp godling or something worse. Plus the Tau will be forced to adapt for their absence with melee suits and better navigation equipment. The Tau homeworld loses their next capital city to a vortex torpedo and the subsequent chaos invasion, which should either delay their expansion for a century, or force them into a furious arms race to create anti-demon weaponry and sensors. Welcome to the 40k, blue aliens. Yes, there are bad things in the galaxy, and you're not prepared. Also, kinda hard to hide that truth when your entire planetary force has to muster to defeat the invasion. Your brother Guilliman has just awakened on Macragge, Primarch Khan. Your brother the Lion, he still sleeps in stasis aboard the Dark Angel's Rock Fortress Monastery, forgotten even by his own sons. Couldn't find your other absent brothers, so I suspect they vacation inside the Maelstrom or the Eye of Terror, killing demons one at the time. I advise the one-man sword army as I send him another STC dataslate with the planetary Gellerfield STC, and another gift in the form of the white_tiger_or saber, one I have recovered from High Kamara. I didn't give him back the wildfire_panoply power armor, because I wanted it and everything inside it copied and made available for my own sons. Khan had only to ask Mars for another power armor, and they would cry in joy to give him one. But his sword was almost part of his identity, and he was known to have killed greater demons with it, which might be needed again. The Tau, you have found it for me, Lord Lancefire? I have thought it long lost. You have my thanks. Khan sent back in a dignified tone, his hands caressing the weapon like a baby. It is your symbol of office, Primarch. So you can defend humanity, not duel like a boy in the shoulder yard with other snotty boys. I answered in a dismissive tone and shut off the link. The next day, the astropaths were all on fervor about the miraculous recovery of Primarch Guilliman, who was better known and rather famous in the Imperium, his frozen face on many paintings and picked captures. I considered using that hexagram necklace a worthy price for waking the Ultramarines' Primarch, because I wanted to use Unit's help to resurrect Sanguinius, who was actually dead. My gambit worked, and I was kinda glad it did. 2 Primarchs for us, and 2 less Primarchs for Chaos. Unless Lorga had already been revived, which I doubted. The Dark Gods did not reward failure, nor shameful defeats. Sure, they might bring him back for a Black Crusade, but that wouldn't be so soon, with as many lose as Chaos forces have suffered at my Exterminatus campaign, and whatever consequences the elimination of the Dark Eldar from the galaxy has caused. Sludge would be rising in power, which would cause lots of turmoil and inner friction among the Chaos Godlings. The loss of Hellforged Unna would deny them a nearby launch platform at Cadia, which will possibly mean a push from the Maelstrom. And that was my intention. The Maelstrom was in range of the Theros, and wasn't that just peachy? Still, I did have Trizin on call. Hello again, my robotic friend. Still interested in that Ordo Sinister Titan? I asked in curious voice. Of course. But I was tricked. All I gained for my effort was a piece of Eldar armor, and that Keeper of Secrets. No avatar. The Necron Lord complained in a childish voice. I almost laughed in his face. Who tricked you, Lord Trizin? Did I not supply you a time and place? Was my gift not there? Are you blaming an innocent stranger for your inability to capture a mere avatar? He grumbled for a minute, but logic was on my side. It was his failure, not mine. Plus the avatar wasn't really a physical being like the Catan, nor a sentient warp construct like a greater demon. You knew I would fail. He muttered in suspicion. You did not fail, Lord Trizin. You have the armor, it just needs an Eldar Exalt to put it on, and the avatar will appear. But you will not attack the Eldar, so you might have to wait for them to attack you. I explained in a patient voice. This put a stop to his grumblings, and our good relations resumed. Good enough then. Eldar are always attacking Necron worlds. I just hope they attack me soon, Trizin said in anticipation. Who wants the Eldar to attack them? I mean, sure they had nice ships and powerful weapons to capture easily in a tesseract, so it, dear Emperor. I was becoming a tiny Trizin, hoping something advanced attacked me. So I checked the Bone Kingdom to find their crown worlds overrun with Tyranids. Oh well, that quest was finally over. Well, it seems the Bone Kingdom has fallen. What other enemy shall we send the hungry Tyranids to? Perhaps Sarlocc. I offered in a pleasant voice. Trizin immediately became cheerful. Oh, that would weaken Emoke even more, especially as his troops are deployed at Hypnot right now. And not doing so great even against a single forged world, after losing Mandragora and many ships. Right. I'll even arrange some aid to arrive at Hypnot and destroy a few tomb ships. But, I will need heavy cruiser-sized reactor and warpless engines for this. In STC template, even if a tiny bit more complicated. With variants for battle barges and battle cruisers. I demand in a shameless voice. Trizin was in a good mood, might as well profit. Meanwhile, I prime a cyclonic torpedo for the Necron world of Sidon, which has begun sending colony ships all over the sector from some kind of subterranean shipyard, and an incendiary exterminatus at Trizak, to catch 12 trillion Tyranids on the ground and in orbit around the former Necron world. My special gifts are also ready, 2 more enslaver bone staffs and the hybrid null rod/bone staff for my Rose. And then, since I notice the side barges are all gearing up to depart for Macragge in a hurry, I steal all their exterminatus and vortex torpedoes. They can request new ones from their Primarch, or maybe forge Metallica, since they did tow that Tau battleship there, at my insinuations and at the Lady Inquisitor's demand. Just after my bodyguards begin to return with their loot from the artifact planet, I call Rose to explain the new developments, and the necessity to redirect the Pharos beacon again. There is no absolute rush, as the Imperium doesn't move fast even when it wants to, but I have a nasty feeling in my gut that things have gone too well for too long. The Tranquility leaves first, escorted by the Serenity till the warp limit. Rose plays with her impossible staff in wonder, and gets to massacre 100 orcs with the blade of her daughter, just to sense how it works. It works great, and she becomes even younger and prettier, maybe because orcs are ageless, since their makers didn't bother to consider what immortal mushrooms might get up to. Or perhaps they did, and intended the Catan to be hunted by their creations for eternity. Just before I leave, I call Fidelia to arrange the transfer of her family of blanks. She and Letitia step directly onto their home world, and thus I can begin to abduct everyone they point out. Almost 13,000 blanks, and 11,000 of them are women. Perhaps they do get born in a preferential female ratio, that's why there are more female blanks than men. Or perhaps the Astra Telephatica cull the men at every centennial visit, to prevent too many births of untouchables. Anyway, it is a great boost to my blank program, and my Rose agrees. I can even accelerate rebuilding the Lamenters, after a decade of compulsory harem management for all the younger men, and tons of schooling and training in the meantime. To have a good soldier, you need to send him to school first, or all you have is a beast in human leathers. History, politics, medicine and science. How can they make wise decisions for strategy, without the knowledge of past failures? How can they use weapons effectively, if they do not know the principles of their work, the limitations and the ways to exploit those limits in their enemies? How can they provide first aid, or target vital organs without medicine? And most importantly, how will they know who to shoot? Too many times Astartes shoot innocents, without ever thinking for themselves. To fight and die for the Emperor, is too easy. Anyone can do that, from attack wolves to the PDF and the Imperial Guard. You don't need Astartes just so they can die. You need Astartes to win. And to win without dying, well, that takes knowledge. Knowledge of battles, of science and of your enemy. Know yourself, and know your enemy, and you shall be undefeated in 1,000 battles. While Immaterium currents may prevent most ships from traveling around Sutha, after yet another beacon shift, my Icaros carrier doesn't use the warp. Takes us 3 days to arrive at Forge Retribution, and immediately begin 100 new research programs on some Tau artifacts, even using Tau prisoners to speed up the translation problems. Same thing for Dark Eldar artifacts and prisoners, of which I do have way too many. Practically their entire war fleet and command structure is in my pocket, and we are not restricted by any Geneva Convention on interrogation procedures. Eldar Corsairs and some of their artifacts get then same treatment, to the extreme joy of the imported tech priests with a love to study Xeno artifacts and biology. Well, for deep analysis we are building research outposts far in asteroid belt, with my minimal security protocols, designed to prevent a plague or rogue experiment ruin my new and pretty forge. The various Orcish adaptations of Necron and Eldar weaponry get a different moon for large-scale experiments, as these improvised weapons tend to explode in the hand of the user as much as blowing up an enemy. By the next year, the poor moon has 100 new craters, and gets named the Mythbuster Moon. Everyone seems to agree to my suggestion, especially the pirates converted into servitors doing the testing. They might wish to die sooner, and escape the torment of their new existence, so I don't really trust them being completely sincere. There are also 1,000 lamented tech marines with red scorpion gene seeds, getting schooling and training from the Forge Angstrom specialists, although I don't intend to stop at 1,000. Tech marines do not count as battle brothers and do not receive full organ implantation, especially not the acid spit glands. Sure, 2 hearts or black carapace along the spine and arms will make them use even light power armor with excellent control, but mind impulse units are even more important. They will pilot spaceships, dropships, fighters, bombers and gunships, as well as tanks and APCs or walkers. And speaking of ships, 10 destroyers arrive in the system empty of crew during this year, and are all rapidly converted into the Los Angeles pattern, as my blank daughters have finished officer school and are begging me for a command. Sure, we do have plenty fast cutters or transport ships, already busy transporting minerals or wood or promethium and coal to our forge, or to Forge Antax. But as it happens, there is another forge world somewhat close, called Hensquetleby, in the Pandrax_subsector, and we have struck a good deal with them for armed sentinels and plasma torpedoes, which we cannot make yet. Those torpedo destroyers now escort slow transport ships filled with our valuable exports, and return with various consumable goods like clothes, or picked or vox casters, and also lasguns, chainsaws and crack missiles as well, plus immigrants and servitors from the Hive World Fulcrum, in that same system. A few trading routes went great, until a Chaos Space Marine chapter called Angels_of_Pain attacks that system in force, despite resistance from the local Astartes. Sure, my daughters immediately rushed to help, destroying a Chaos battlecruiser and 2 strike cruisers before running out of torpedoes, and retreating, but I was also on my way with the Icarus and the Tranquility, as soon as I heard. 5 days later, we arrived in the system to find the Red_Scimitars struggling to defend a big space station called Trantation. Almost instantly, the Chaos ships began drifting, as their entire crew was quickly vanished into my labyrinth, then ejected into the sun. Cultists and corrupted marines were not my favorite, and I wouldn't risk my precious collection to some warp infection. Then we launch the corvettes and blow all their ships up, erasing all evidence of cheating. The Blood Angels teleport on the station to help clean up the remaining opposition, while my corvettes are already pushing the chaos-infested hulls toward the sun. The poor locals are rather terrified and many of them mutated or infected by chaos sorcerers, while human limbs and heads are hanged on spikes and nails, in a macabre presentation. So I make sure to return the favor with crack grenades detonated at those bastards' armor joints, leaving many traitors crawling on mangled stumps, until the Blood Angels arrive to end their misery. It doesn't take long to get invited at a pleasant meeting with the fabricator dominus of this forge and with the chapter master of the Red Scimitars. It seems I did get a bit famous around the eastern fringe, and even my wolf is famous. Well, he is a wolf that can understand words spoken or written, so maybe that's why. His descendants with normal she-wolves did not inherit the best traits, especially his size, although they are smart and have acute senses. But then all wolves are like that, I think. Maybe I should test the chronophage blade if it works on wolves? The immortal wolf. Huh? Lord Lancefire. You are smiling creepily. The fabricator says as I just stare at the cogitator screen, lost in thought. Ah, that. Brain implant, sometimes I get lost in thought. So, you like the corvettes, I would say? I wonder out loud. Not overly much, but we could invest some resources to produce 1,000 such ships for better system coverage. If only we could have salvaged that adamantium from the traitor ships. The fabricator complains in a familiar manner. Demons in the walls, fabricator. Not worth it, trust me. What about the planetary Geller field, for the Hive World Fulcrum? It should reduce chances of warp incursions, maybe even stop psychers acting up. I advise him, gently. It is an amazing STC discovery, I admit. Not overly complicated either, especially the one buried in the planet mantle for geomagnetic energy. However, I believe it will interfere with warp-capable ships. We will need to test it on a distant moon, and a whole range of spaceships and warp engines. The Magus says in a rational voice, and he is perhaps right. Haven't considered this, till now. I do prefer traveling with the warpless engines. It is a bit more expensive to obtain a large hull like a galleon or conveyor, but after that, it only takes water or even ice to travel among stars. Our navigator is the most relaxed member of the crew. I explain in tiny snort. I would think it so. Perhaps one day, my forge will have a behemoth ship like that too. He allows in a pitiful voice. As it happens, I do have a big ship in my pocket. Well, I do know the location of an abandoned Orc Terror ship. Large enough to fit a battleship-scale warpless engine. I mean, my clan conquered that Orc planet, and that ship was just left derelict in the void. Stupid Orcs, right? I offer in a wide smile. Nobody doubts Orc stupidity, so the gambit works. More wine gets poured without asking. A Xenoship? He asks in worried voice. Well, I suppose it has been a human commercial galleon once, millennia ago. The engine placement is the only thing left to identify it after. I muse out loud. Really, then it's not a problem at all. And I expect is plated with a megaton of adamantium and plasteel, right? The fabricator asks, rubbing a few tentacles. I just nod kindly. And 1,000 orcish weapons of any kind imaginable, plus some really outside any imagination. My tech priests were horrified, but then I am a son of the Emperor, so what do I care? I reply in a careless voice. We should really tow that derelict here, for safekeeping. My forge will compensate you on delivery. The tech priest promises in a solemn voice. Can you repair my Tranquility battleship? Also mount a Nova cannon and 200 lance batteries on the broadsides? We can provide more adamantium hulls and even some Dark Eldar captured machines. I ask in a curious voice. The fabricator nods with confidence. It would be an honor to restore that Apocalypse class to full strength. Even if the Tranquility was modified with torpedo cells, like those system corvettes. Projected timeline? I ask with some worry. Depends on mineral supplies. Maybe 20 years, maybe 50. It will never be new, but without traveling into the warp, I suppose it will have an excellent service from now on. But 200 lance batteries, is that even feasible? He asks in worry. The Macarius pattern reactor is 3 times stronger, so it can supply enough energy for more lances. I was also thinking a couple of thrusters on the side, for faster turning. Like 2 horns, or an ancient bicycle steering handle. I saw something like this on various fortress monasteries. I propose with an ignorant shrug, and produce a childish model on the commercial dataslate. It does have everything I want, just made in crayon, so to speak. 3 teleportarium, 3 Gellerfield generators, 10 landing hangars for assault dropships. 3 vertical torpedo cells of 100 warheads each, probably sufficient to blow up a Necron tomb ship in one salvo. Or at least cripple it badly. Then 5 void shields, an iron shield and a flare shield of battleship strength, which should slow down railgun or macro cannon shells, plus block fighter or bomber ordnance like missiles and bombs. I could take on a Gloriana-class battleship in fair fight with such a beast, and I will probably need to. Those extra maneuver engines will provide extra acceleration, or you turn one engine off, to change direction 20% faster. It's doable, I suppose. But we will name it Apocalypse B pattern for my forge's prestige. I have no doubt you will lead it in many glorious battles once it is finished. The fabricator replied after a long minute. I smiled genially and held out my hand. You can be certain of this, Magus. I have never lost a battle. The tech priest laughed in a mechanical tone, probably a recording from his biologic years. It only takes once, Perf Lancefire. But maybe you're lucky, or the Omnissiah has plans for you. He was right though. With battles, you only needed to lose once. Every year, a lucky ship captain from my clan gets the honor of discovering another flotilla of abandoned destroyers, mostly intact if in bad repair. It seems the systems around our core worlds are littered with pirate ships, the crew vanished and ship logs showing no clue. Then again, There are strange warp things like the Maelstrom and the Haddock's anomaly which often cause the same results to unwary explorers. Soon enough, the eager navigators and my officers get to fly their new ship to a forge world like Metallica or Tigris, to get it upgraded for fringe operations, in exchange for Xeno artifacts or even a rare STC pattern of lesser value. Then a heavy cruiser gets found, and sent to Triplex Fal to receive a Nova cannon, right as Primarch Guilliman begins his own enormous crusade, creating 100 new fortress worlds in the path of the Tyrannid fleets, and mustering 1,000,000 guard regiments all over the Ultima Segmentum. That's the real power of a Primarch, and there are few who dare say no to the son of the Emperor. Primarch Khan is doing something else around the solar segmentum, cleaning up corruption on the larger Hive worlds, with an ever-increasing horde of Astartes and a few Mechonicus legions. Hive world Necromunda gets mentioned a few times by the astropaths, which doesn't surprise me at all. Khan really is a pointed sword, and I did point him at Necromunda. A dozen Astartes chapters get founded at his demand, to safeguard those Hive worlds, after the tech priests have scoured the underhives for extra servitors and hidden STCs. Cults get investigated and butchered, corrupt governors burned alive, just business as usual in the Imperium. No mention of reality cages being installed anywhere, which is troubling. The siege of Forge Hypnot ends in a Pyrrhic victory for Cult Mechonicus, as the Necrons unleashed a few advanced Infocyte viruses on that forge, destroying many of the defenses and the robotic defenders. But it is still a victory, as Hypnot is not conquered, while the attacking Necrons lose 2 tomb ships and a dozen harvest ships to the combined might of the defenders. Mass torpedo volleys and archaeotech weapons from the Arch Mechonicus cruiser are the principal methods that worked, plus Nova cannon cruisers supporting the fleet from afar. Knights and Baneblades with iron shields proved devastating on the ground, just like Fury interceptors in void combat. Soon after, a certain warp rift in the vicinity, called the Van_Growth_S_Rapidity closes unexpectedly. I suspect this was Lord Trazyn, playing with his Blackstone fortress and testing its capabilities. A Chaos Strike force that departs from the Haddock's anomaly towards Solemnus disappears mysteriously, which only hints at more anti-warp weaponry being experimented by the insane Necron wizard. Sadly, I am banned from Suta for several more years, so I don't get a clear confirmation, except reading astropathic telegrams and my own logical deductions. Larissa does get a special mission afterwards, and sneakily blows up a Necron world called Cthelmex, which seemed to be a dead world but really wasn't. The star system is now littered with fragments of Necron tech and entire asteroids made of Blackstone, so we have another salvage and mining spot only known to my clan and Forge Retribution. My daughter Andrea travels to Forge Megaia, and sells them the tip about the melted space hulk on Gorka Morka, and gets promised another fleet carrier filled with torpedo corvettes, and a dozen more Katakan regiments, provisioned to our own specifications. The STC data slates and warning about Necron and Tyrannid invasions spur the Fabricator into a massive defensive buildup, which will be constructed from the recovered adamantium and Blackstone from the burned world. It will take a few decades for a solid result of this trip, but Andrea did tow a large Dark Eldar cruiser after her, which is filled with advanced xenotech. Our favor is guaranteed now. Forge Antax gets the same and more, as I donate to them the old Grand Cruiser I confiscated in the Magog Crusade, and they immediately begin repairs and refit to create a true Arch Mechonicus from the casino ship. My mentor Jaren is away though, and it wouldn't surprise me if Forge World Palomar simply gets expunged from all records. Finding an intact STC is the holy grail of Cult Mechonicus, and the culmination of any Magus explorer's life. Sadly, I can't really help my mentor directly, but I did point him at the right path. I also whisper aroma to Forge Riser, via my daughter Ginia. She went there with another Dark Eldar cruiser in tow, and more Blackstone and Adamantium, to propose the Macarius Omega tank pattern, based around an atomantic reactor and a simplified plasma blast gun, covered by an iron and a flare shield. There was also a Sentinel variant with an iron shield and a melter gun, for anti-Necron work, but we didn't have miniaturized plasma reactors and plasma weaponry. Only Riser or Mars could make these, and we only wanted 1,000 Macarius tanks and 10,000 Sentinels. She came back with our second fleet carrier called Daedalus and 10 Katakan infantry regiments, plus a small explorer expedition to be based at Forge Retribution. And by small expedition, I mean 5 cruisers and 20 destroyers, plus a few million tech priests and engineers on a mobile forge ship containing most of their advanced technology. The Orc invasion on Ryza was still going on, although a single continent remained infested with greenskins, and the ironclad battleship on the moon had been breached and razed, to be converted in a powerful Arc Mechanicus, armed with the best technology of the cult. That would take perhaps a century, so it was a long project. Still much faster than building an adamantium hull from zero. The colonization into the second wave of expansion continues with this influx of hardy pioneers, and also immigrants from nearby hive worlds. It will take a decade to produce the first reality cage at Forge Retribution, because we do have too many projects going on. Like repairing and upgrading the Vitrix battleship, which takes megatons of plasteel, adamantium and blackstone for example. But the fabricator Dominus is also training millions of new acolytes which will take over the job of servicing tanks and fighters and sentinels, as well as mining machinery and colonial infrastructure. Slowly, the more experienced tech priests will return to the forge and be replaced, increasing the manufacture output a dozen times. And they do manufacture, by hand and tentacle. The only concession I could receive was for wood processing and furniture factories, which are being organized on every jungle or forest planet with fewer restrictions and religious protocol. I think the Mechanicus just doesn't see organic processing to have the same value as metal and forging, which kinda makes sense. Exporting furniture and paper is a good business though, as the huge masses of humanity in the Imperium need as many megatons of it as they can find. Of course, we never sell directly to a hive world, which would be stupid and costly. We donate our wares to a nearby forge world, and they sell it, using the cash to recover the cost for the machinery they gift to us. It's a simple but effective tax evasion method, as no money changes hands, thus no value can be asserted to our trade. The Imperium might catch on in a few hundred years, but by then the infrastructure would be built, and dozens of generations would have used these machines and electronics to create new towns, railways, roads, power grids and many other projects of planetary importance. Even then, there is little the Imperium can do, to a trader dynasty based beyond the borders. Well, there is. The Administratum can expand the imperial borders to include my holdings or withdraw my warrant of trade, but I also have friends in high places. And while the first company of lamenters slowly gets trained and implanted with their special organs, the next company of blank recruits is reaching the cutoff age for safe implantation. So they spread their gene seed into as many women as humanly possible, about 600 every year. It is hard work, as I can attest personally. I had to stop accepting new daughters and their sisters from the local nobility into my bed, just because my body was still flesh and thus weak. Plus blank concubines were a lot more effective at producing blank babies. One new planet usable mostly for agriculture was consecrated as a cardinal world though, at the request of my saintly nurses, and then a miracle occurred, as thousands of sisters of battle kidnapped by the savage Dark Eldar appeared on the surface, followed by millions of former slaves and captured people. There were even Order Familius Sister among them, and let me tell you those women were not saintly at all. They rapidly took charge of my eugenics project, mixing and matching genetic attributes for extra reliability and durability, first among the new immigrants, then my Katakan regiments, and lastly my own clan. Even their own sisters of battle were kinda harshly ordered to start pumping babies to increase the next generations of female warrior by 10 times. Sadly, no imperial cult priests or administrators were found among the saved, and thus they had to improvise and select leaders from their own ranks. Female bishops worked side by side with the self-elected canoness and her retinue, while my clan and tech priests provided housing and infrastructure. And of course, every visit by me or Victor and any of my sons was seen as some sort of day of celebration which ended with a dozen sisters getting impregnated while singing glory hymns to the God Emperor. It is a crazy galaxy, but I have learned not to examine the underlying substrates too deeply. Take whatever joy from life you can, because the Tyranids were coming, and the horrors were endless. The only problem is my slightly overpraised legend, an overanalyzed life, which leads to Lady Justine being declared a saint for fighting beside the angel of the Emperor to defeat Fulgrim the Serpent, and myself for killing Lorga the traitor. Well, they surely don't know everything I did, because I would get burned alive as well. Anyway, this effervescence of religion sentiment spreads among all the worlds and colonies, which increases productivity and reduces dissent, especially in the hive cities. There is even a proposal to begin construction of new hive city on Salvation, the new cardinal world. I delay that for a few decades, because manpower and resources are not sufficient. Plus I want that world to produce food, both cereals and meat. Fisheries are being set up, and millions of groks and local poultry get imported from other agri-worlds in preparation for large food processing plants getting built here, as well as buying tractors and cereal seed. If this project works, I might duplicate it on a dozen more worlds with slightly better climate. My hive cities sure need to receive other food than processed algae, nutri-gruel, carboloves, vitamed and recycled proteins. Already their populations are slightly healthier and vigorous, from vaccines and food imports, but the Imperium is too far and expensive to trade with in large quantities. At least water and methane are not an issue, due to having system corvettes deployed in every system, able to drag comets into orbit for processing. Asteroids are plentiful as well, both for minerals and silicates, so the industry gets a cheap influx of resources. Defenses get built over every single world, also outposts and listening posts for 100 light years all around, which is normal and common sense in my opinion. Then one day, a Mars-class battlecruiser and an Universe-class conveyor arrive at Ilivar, with a couple of white scars on board.